So I'll be talking about the present and the future of Angular with Ivy. Uh, so what exactly is Ivy, by the way? Ivy is the third generation of Angular's compilation and rendering pipeline. The previous two generations are written right here, which is the template compiler and the view engine. Ivy is also an enabler. So when the Angular team started to work on Ivy, they had a few design goals in mind, and they classified these design goals into three major categories. It was all about optimizability, incrementality, and flexibility. Now, optimizability and incrementality is something that we now see on the table already, with all these bundle sizes shrinking, and a lot of these things are coming in from a lot of these aspects to it, like tree shaking of the framework code itself, and not generation of metadata files. So now the whole rendering engine is which was once a very giant switch statement sort of a thing, is now broken down into more granular and smaller instructions. And these are the instructions that are eventually called by the compiled code that we have in Angular. So what this makes us do is, if there is some part of the framework code that's not really used, these specific instructions can now be tree shaked off, and they won't be a part of the final bundle. And these are what are called the IV instruction sets. So the IV instruction, there is essentially an IV instruction set for a lot of different things and features that Angular has to offer. So there are instruction sets for DOM creation, for content projection, for internationalization, and pipes and SVGs and stuff like that. Another thing is that now we don't really generate any metadata files. So this is one of the screenshots from a code wherein I was still on Angular 7, and I was working with the Vue engine code. When I used to run ngc, which is the Angular compiler, then it used to generate all these different metadata files, like this metadata.json, ng factory, ng summary, and all these different files. With Ivy, it's different because now everything is local, and everything is already a part of the component.js file that gets generated by the Angular compiler. So now we don't have all these metadata files. We just have one component file, and it has everything in place. So with a lot of framework code as well being tree-shaked, and these metadata files not being generated, it it ideally results in a smaller bundle size, which makes sense. Another important thing that happened was locality, in the sense of, let's say, if you're using a structural directive like an ngIf inside your Angular component, then the template code that used to get generated still had references to the view container ref and template ref from ngIf. Now, we already know that these two things are the dependencies of ngIfs, and what we see here is that the generated code of the component that's using ngIf also has these references, which makes it really hard to not trigger a global compilation when the app component is changed. uh, so the compilation time and all the build time as well gets increased. But if you talk about the code that gets generated by Ivy, then you'll see that there's no such reference to the view container ref or template ref. So Ivy now uses ngIf, but it refers to ngIf and everything it uses from ngIf via a very clean public API. So if nothing from that clean public API has changed, then there's no need for Angular to again recompile that ngIf, which doesn't eventually trigger a global set of compilation or a wider range of compilation in the files. And all of this happens because some sorts of static fields gets attached by the compiler to the class files for each of these um, building blocks in the Angular application. And I've talked quite a lot about this in a talk that I gave last year at NG Sri Lanka Conf. So please feel free to check that out. Again, coming back to the design goals, this talk is not really about optimizability and incrementality. I'll probably focus a bit more on the flexibility aspect of it. So I'll be talking about quite a lot of these things. So before I do, let me just shortly introduce myself. Hello, everyone. My name is Siddharth Ajmera, and I'm a full stack JavaScript developer based out in Sydney, Australia. I'm a Google developer expert in Angular, and I write tech articles for publications like indepth.dev. I have also a few courses on Udemy and PackPub. And just in case you might want to reach out to me, this is my Twitter handle. So come say hi. All right, now I've broken down the whole talk into two sections. One talks about the present of Angular with Ivy, and the other talks about the future. And I'll try to demonstrate all of these different aspects with a few examples so that it all makes sense. So let's start with small and meaningful stack traces. So for this one, I have created two different StackBlitz projects. One of them uses the View Engine code because here I've disabled Ivy, and the second one uses Ivy because here I've enabled it. Now what I'm doing here is that it just has two components. One of them is the child component, which with the selector hello that just interpolates an input string that gets passed to it by the input by the parent component, which uses it here. And this is exactly the same thing that I'm doing for the view engine code as well right here. But here I'm getting an error that's called the expression changed after it has been checked. So if we try to check for the reason of this error in this code that runs the view engine code, then it takes me to the child components ng factory, but then I cannot really make sense of the ng factory file because there are quite a lot of nulls and magic numbers going around here. That's not really the case with the Ivy code, because if I open up the exact same stack trace in Ivy, then I can see this line that takes me to the exact uh, template instruction that was causing this error, which was because of some value that was changed in the input property after the component was checked. So again, it gives me some sort of an idea or understanding that okay, there was some issue in here, and then once I fix that issue, then uh, if if I either not change this input property here, then I should probably be able to fix that issue. But if I do want to change it, then since I'm changing it after it has been checked, I'll have to trigger the change detection again. So that's what I'll have to do in order to fix this issue. So if I do that, so explicitly call detect changes, then I should get rid of the error. So again, it's pretty difficult to read and reason about this error in the pre-Ivy times, which was running on View Engine, but that's not really the case with Ivy, because now with Ivy, things are a bit more understandable as far as we get to see the template instructions. The next up is about ahead of time compilation by default, and this is a significant breakthrough because now with Ivy things are so fast and compact that we can now run ahead of time compilation even in the development mode. So we now don't have to ship the compiler to the browser in order to run the application, and it would just be everything would be pre-compiled basically. So in order to demonstrate this, I have some code. One of the examples that I'd show here is that this is currently running the View Engine code. So I can still see the application being printed onto the screen and still working as expected. But the issue here is that there is a button that I have, and then this button is calling a method. This method is defined in my TypeScript class, but for some reason, while typing it in a hurry, I somehow misspelled the name of the method. But I can still see the application running as expected, but only after I click on this button, I'll see a runtime error, right? Uh, but if I try to do this exact same thing with Ivy, then since Ivy is running ahead of time compilation, it would result in an error right up front without even rendering the application, which is a bit better because now you won't have to deal with runtime errors. It would specifically tell you right up front that there is an error in your template, and if you don't fix that error, then I won't compile. So let's try fixing that error quickly by just changing the name. And now, since there is no error as such, it would all work as expected. So this is one of the other benefits of Ivy, that you get ahead of time compilation by default, and then you won't have to deal with these runtime errors or exceptions that happen once you have built your application specifically in dev mode and then try to run it. The next very important thing is lazy loading of components. And before Angular 9, you could even you could just maybe load modules lazily, but with Angular 9 you can now also load components lazily, and that all is thanks to Ivy. How exactly do we do that though? Well, so for the sake of this example, I'll be using a local setup because StackBridge is not that good while demonstrating lazily loaded modules. So I'll try to do that on a local setup. All right. So let me just load this application. So I have this load GIF button. This is coming in from the app component HTML. This is the button that calls the load GIF lazily method. And then there is this div to which I've assigned a template ref, which is host for lazy component. So inside the app component, what I'm doing is I'm just referring to that host by using a view child. And I'm trying to read the view container ref from here. So view container ref is to be read, and then I'm setting static to be true because this is something that would be evaluated at runtime on the fly. So once I get the view container ref here, I can just assign it to this vc ref property, and then there is this method that I'm calling, which is called load gif lazily. So inside the load gif lazily method, I'm just using a dynamic import statement in order to get this gif component that I have right here. This is a very simple Angular component wherein I have an input property which is GIF source, and then there is some template. Now, in order to load this, I'm using the dynamic import statement again, and this dynamic import statement would return a promise, and so I can just await it by defining the method as async. Let me just zoom in a bit to make the fonts more clear. And now with that, I can just inject the component factory resolver as well in order to get the component factory. So I call the resolve component factory and then get component with that. And then once I get the factory, I can then pass this factory to the view container refs create component method, pass it the factory, which would eventually give me an object that would have the component instance that I'm destructuring out here. Once I get the component instance, I can then pass in the GIF source, and then that should hopefully make it work. So how this lazily loading of components works is that I don't have the GIF component here declared in the app module, right? And so I also don't have an import for this in the app module, and so this will be bundled as a separate entity as such. So once I click on this load GIF button, it will make a separate call in order to download the chunk for the GIF component. So it does that, and after it does that, it loads it with the help of the um, create component on the VC ref. So that's where this host comes into the picture, right? So now what we are seeing here is that we can now also load components on the fly lazily, only on demand, with the help of Ivy and Angular 9. Next up is the ng object that is exposed on the window object. So what exactly is this all about? Well, one of the things that can be done is that once you go to the element section, and if you try to select any element with the help of this element selector, or you can also do that in the element section, whatever you select gets stored in a global variable named $0. So I've selected the app gif tag here, and then if I go to console and type in $0, I'll get access to that appgif tag in here, the appgif element basically. Another thing is that in the development mode, I also have access to the ng object on the window object. So now we have the ng object, and then this has a few APIs exposed on it. So I can use these APIs in order to change things on the runtime, and then try to figure out how my component is reacting to those changes. So in order to do that, let's try to get a hold of the GIF component. And so in order to do that, I'll just type in const GIF component equals ng dot. Now again, on the ng object, we have this get component API. And to this get component API, I can pass in the element reference, which I have already stored in the $0 property. So as soon as I press enter and then try to log whatever we get from the GIF component, I'll get access to the GIF source, which is that input property on the GIF component, and some other things as well. Now, where exactly is this useful? Well, let's say that if you wanted to somehow change the value of this input property that we have on the GIF component, which is the GIF source. So GIF component dot GIF source equals this. Let's try to change this and see how our component reacts. So I'll press enter, and let's wait for a few seconds, but I don't really see that change getting reflected, right? What exactly is the issue here? Well, I'm changing the GIF source here, but um, for some reason, since this is not really working in the context uh, of the way Angular would perform change detection, that is something that we'll have to perform explicitly on our own. And in order to do that, there's also this apply changes method that can be used. So how you'll use it is that you'll just pass in uh, the component instance to the apply changes method. So GIF component. And as soon as I press enter, you should see the GIF getting changed, right? So again, a few things that you can use with Ivy as of today. Uh, these are the four things that I've demonstrated: small and meaningful stack traces, ahead of time compilation by default, uh, lazily loading components, which we have seen, and then using the ng object for debugging purposes. But let's talk about the future now. I'll also try to explain this with the help of a few examples. Now, just consider that you wanted to just render a component and not just a whole Angular application. What exactly will you do in that case? Well, as of today, we can still just load an Angular component, but we'll have to somehow still depend on Angular modules, right? Because without Angular modules, we cannot really foresee, or we cannot really try to think of a component as as a standalone component, right? But the thing is that it's probably not really possible to use a lot of the features that we have in an Angular application without Angular modules, because Angular modules are linchpins to an Angular application, and they make a lot of things work uh, in the background without you having to know much about it, right? A few of these things include change detection and dependency injection and stuff like that. But is it really possible to change? Is it really possible to render an Angular component without Angular modules? Well, with Ivy, it can be possible, but since again we won't be using an Angular module, we will have to do a few things that Angular does for us on our own. Let's try to see that in action. So there's this stack blitz that I've created. Um, Here we just have four files. Now, in a regular Angular application, you might be used to a lot of files like the main.ts file, and then your app component file, the app module file, and a lot of these other different files. But this project just has four files. It has an index.html file wherein I have some IV tag. There is the styles.css file. Then there is this package.json file that has these four dependencies like the Angular core. Now we just wanted to download Angular core, but then Angular core has some peer dependencies on RxJS, TSLib, and Zone.js, and that's why I downloaded it. But we would just be using Angular core for this. Now let's have a look at the code that we have in the index.ts. So we import a few things that is prefixed with this theta theta symbol or just the theta symbol. And there is a TypeScript class that we have, which is known with the name IV component. It has a property named name and a method named toggle name. But apart from that, it has a few other things like these two static fields. One of them is this theta FAC static field that is responsible for for creating an instance of the IV component. And then there is this theta CMP static field, which is a result of call to the define component IV instruction. Now, to that, we are passing in an object that has a few fields. But if we just ignore these other different fields, let's just focus on this template function. This template function is a function that gets called by IV when it has to uh, render the template of a component, and it does that in two phases. It has this render flag that determines which phase it is running in, and then there is this context or the component instance that we get during that particular phase. So if the value of this is 1, you can think of it as running it in the initialization mode, and then if the value is 2, then you can think of it as running in the change detection mode. So once it is initializing, you'll see that a lot of these things that we see on the UI are being generated here by calling a few of these IV instructions. Like the element start is being called to generate an H1, but inside that H1 there is also this text node that it has, and on the text node it has to render whatever we have inside the context name. Then we have the element ends, so that's where the h1 tag ends. Then we also have another button tag below that, so that's where the element starts. But on that button we also have a click listener, and once the user clicks on the button, we are calling the toggle name method. It also has a text node which says change name, which is this change name right here, and we end that element at that point. Apart from that, other things that you'll see that these 0, 1, 2, and 3, these are a few numbers that you can think of as some sorts of indices from the data structure on which these specific elements or the positions of these specific elements would be stored. And this is something that will be used in the change detection phase. So in the change detection phase, you can see that there's this advanced instruction which starts ideally from the 0th index if it's not already at some specific index, and that it advances to that number of stops. So here, since it's advancing to 1, it will just advance to one stop, which would make the control to go to the text. Now, once the control is on the text, then we are calling the text interpolate IV instruction, and this is how the interpolation works. So overall, this is the template function that is going to get called. But after all these things, how exactly is the component being rendered? That's where the render component IV instruction comes into the picture. Now, this is one simple IV instruction that you can use. You'll pass it a component class that has everything that is required to render a component. Everything here being the regular properties and methods that it would generally need. But apart from that, also two static fields. One of them is the theta FAC and one of them is the theta CMP. Once it has these static fields in place, you just need to pass it a host, which is IV in this case, because we had this index.html wherein we had this IV tag. So you can think of it as a host. That's the exact same host that we referred to using the view container ref in our lazy loading example, right? So you can think of it in this way. Now, this is the one single line of code that renders the component. That's why I'm able to see this component getting rendered here. But let's try to click on this button now, right? Now this button should ideally call the toggle name method, which we have present, which is already present on the IV component class. So this should eventually toggle the name between SID and IV. So let's try doing that. I'm clicking on the button, but the text here is not getting changed. Why is that the case? Well, as I said, that Angular modules are linchpins into Angular applications, and a lot of the things that we don't really notice as such are taken care of by Angular modules. But if we are not using Angular modules, then these are the sorts of things that we will have to do on our own. And change detection is one of those things. So here, the issue that we are facing is that the property is probably changing, but we are not able to see that change getting reflected onto the template because change detection is probably not working. So how exactly can we mark this component to be checked and then to eventually trigger change detection or uh, update itself when change detection has occurred? Well, from the Angular core library, I can also I can also import this thing called mark dirty, and this is an IV instruction that you will call in order to mark this component as dirty, so that in the next change detection phase, Angular performs that change detection and then sorts of apply those changes on the component. So let me click on the change name button now, and you can already see that the text is now getting changed. Great. So this is a really good thing, and now we are able to see the changes getting reflected. But if you see the code that we wrote in order to render this component, you will see that it's a very tricky code, so to speak, and we are not really. This isn't something that you would expect a developer to write again and again if you just have to render something, right? Because this is pretty tricky and you won't be able to remember everything that should be in place. Right now I don't really have a lot of other things, like a lot of other buttons and some other sorts of animations in place. uh, but what if you have these, and what if you want to render that? Well, there should be an easier way to do it, right? The easier way to do it would be by using the compiler, because this is the sort of code that the compiler generates for us, right? If we pass a component to the compiler, then it would ideally add these static fields like the theta cmp and the theta fac static fields for us, so that we don't have to do this on our own. So that's exactly what we'll try to do in the second example, wherein we are using the compiler. So what exactly we do here is that we just again have these four files, the exact same four files. But in the dependencies section, you'll see that apart from Angular core, I'm also using the Angular compiler. What exactly do I do with the Angular compiler? Well, I've defined some metadata. Now you can think of this metadata as that metadata that you pass to the component decorator, wherein we have the selector and then there is also a template. Now, I just use the component decorator and I decorate my IV class with that component decorator, and I also pass in some metadata. And this, till this point, this is something that we are quite used to writing in case of an Angular component. Now, this is the component that we have, but it doesn't have those static fields, which is the theta CMP and the theta FAC static fields that Angular would need in order to render this. But like I said, these are the things that can be generated by the compiler, right? So we call the theta compile component IV instruction, which is again something that I've imported from Angular core, but it would somehow be relying on the Angular compiler. That's why I'll have to import that as well. And once that is imported, and I call the theta compile component IV instruction, pass it the IV component along with the metadata, then hopefully it should compile my component and then add those static fields like the theta FAC and the theta CMP static fields onto my IV component class. And once that is done, then I can simply call the theta render component IV instruction, pass it the IV class, the IV component, and pass it the host, and I should see the component getting printed onto the screen. And that's exactly what is happening here. Now, you might think that, um, how exactly do we visualize this? right? So what I've tried to do is I've tried to add console logs before the compilation takes place and after the compilation takes place, so that it's a bit more clear and easier for us to visualize. So let's do something here wherein we will just place breakpoints on these two lines. So this is the one before compilation and the one after compilation. Let me just reload the application once. And once the breakpoint hits the previous state wherein the state is before compilation, I'll go to console and type in IV component. So IV component. Now again, if there was a theta FAC and a theta CMP static field in there, then I should have seen those fields uh, being shown as a suggestion over here, but that's not really the case. I do see these as suggestions because I've tried to access them before, but if I try to print them onto the console, then I'll still see undefined being printed. So theta CMP as well. Both of them are undefined at the moment. Let's now step through this step and then place the breakpoint at the step wherein compilation has happened. Now let's try to do this exact same thing. So I type in theta CMP, press enter, and I'll see that the theta CMP static field has now been attached to the IV component. And that would also be the case with theta FAC. Right. So now I get both these static fields onto the IV class, to the IV component class, and then with that I can simply call the render component IV instruction in order to render the component. Uh, this is just one example, but you can also leverage this example in case of dynamically loading a component uh, in your Angular application. So how would that work is, let's say I comment this out. I have another button here, um, and this button is going to load and render a component using the render component IV instruction. So for that, I'll just specify this method as async again, because initially I'll just have to call in the dynamic import statement in order to load this second component. Again, this lazy IV component is not a part of the Angular module, so it would be bundled as a separate chunk. So what will happen once I load the component is I can just destructure its component, and then instead of calling the different methods like the component factory resolver dot resolve component factory and then calling the create component method on the view container ref, I can simply call render component IV instruction, pass it the lazy IV component, and then pass it the host. And with this, if I go back to the application, I see a button that says load component lazily via render component. And let's also go to the network, clear everything off, and click on this button. So I see that there's a separate call that goes on to fetch the lazy IV component, and then only that gets rendered onto the screen. Great. Another uh, another nice thing with this render component IV instruction is that now you can specify the host as anything. And by anything, I mean literally anything. So here I've specified the host as anything. One thing that I'll change is that now let's make the load IV component lazily method to accept a host, which would be of type string. And then I can just use this host as the host property. And with that, I'll also pass in the host that we have here and save. So now I should see two buttons on the UI. Both of these buttons load the exact same component. But now what happens here is that once I click on one of these buttons, it makes that call in order to download this component lazily and on demand. But on the second instance wherein I call the exact same method, since the instance of this component has already been downloaded, it will be using the exact same definition for this component, and it won't download it again. Great, right? um, but there is again a challenge with this, so let's see what the challenge is all about. I'll go to the lazy iv component, and let's say that in this I had injected a service as a dependency, which is this data service right here. And the data service is something that I'll import from its respective path. And then inside the ng-on-init method, I just make that API call. And hopefully, s- and I should hope that once um, this component gets instantiated and the ng on init gets called, then it should also somehow, after making that API call to get the data, print that data onto the UI. So let's try doing that. So I'll go to the console, clear everything from the network, try to load the component. So it loads the component, but it doesn't render it here. And I also see that there is an error on the console. So I'll go to the console and check what exactly the error is. It says that inject must be called from an injection context. This has something to do with dependency injection, I guess. So the issue that I see here is that since this is a component that gets loaded on demand and lazily at runtime, it doesn't really know how exactly to inject something as a dependency, because it probably doesn't have an injector of its own. So it somehow needs an injector that can help it to load something, right? So the good thing about this second configuration object that we pass to the render component IV instruction is that apart from the host, we can also pass in an injector. Now, the app component itself would already have an injector in place. And in order to access that injector, I can inject the injector as a dependency as well. So I do that, and I can then pass it this dot injector. Save. Let's try to load the application again, clear everything off, and I'll click on the button. Now I see that the component gets loaded successfully, which is a good news. But there's also this API call that goes through, and in the console, I see something logged on to the screen. Great. So now I can also load a component dynamically at runtime and also pass it an injector that could then be used in order to inject a service as a dependency, as long as this service can be injected as a part of this injector. Perfect. So let's try doing one small thing here. Let's try to go to this component, and instead of subscribing to it, let's try to um, use data, which is of type observable, and let's specify the type as any for the moment. But let's try to assign whatever we get from the get data method, which is obviously an observable. So let's try to assign this observable to the data property, and let's inside the template which we have here, let's try to inside a pre tag. Sorry, p. I'll just try to um, pass the data through an async pipe, and then pass the data, whatever I get from the async pipe, through the JSON pipe, so that I could stringify it and then load things. So I'll save this, and I get an error. Hmm. So the error says that A comma was expected. Okay, it's probably giving me this error because I forgot to use backticks. Let's save this and go back. Okay, so I now see the application loading properly, but let's try to uh, load the component. Okay, so I load the component now, but it says that the pipe JSON could not be found. Okay, the pipe JSON could not be found. Let's try just running this through an async pipe and see what happens. So the application loads again and I click on the button and now it says that the pipe async could not be found. Okay, so I can tell at this point that there are a few pipes like the async pipe and the JSON pipe which are exposed to us with the help of the common module, I guess, are not really some things that can be used here, right? So this is something that probably uh, still cannot be done. And you might think that where exactly am I going with this talk and what exactly am I trying to present here and where exactly are we going with this in terms of Angular? Well, you can think of it as going in a world wherein we might not have to definitely use an Angular module just in order to render a component. And other thing is that we can also somehow um, make things like Zone.js or RxJS optional in this case. And there is also there's also a demo that was created by Minco. I guess it was 2 years back. Yep. And here what he's trying to do is he's trying to do the exact same thing while loading a component. If I zoom this in a bit, but this component, which is this app component, is somehow dependent on a zippy component, and then it is also using the capitalized pipe, which are two components that we have created on our own. But again, since we are not using Angular modules, the component that we have here might not be aware of what exactly is this zippy component or what exactly is this capitalized pipe. But hopefully this is just a proposal though, and I'm not quite sure. Maybe Alex would be able to help answer that question. But yeah, in this proposal what he says is that we can probably have a depth array. This depth array can have all these other dependencies that we might need, like the different components and pipes that might be required for a component, and then we should hopefully be able to use it in our component as well. And yeah, so that was it regarding my talk. Thank you all for listening, and I'm open to questions. Thank you.